Frank St. Jacques Ackerman LLP for the applicant. So I heard the comments from yesterday's review session. We plan to submit a written response, but I'll briefly go over how we intend to address the board's comments in that written response. So I'll just start with the school-age children issue. We will, in our submission, provide more details with respect to the program in support of the argument that the school-age children program is an accessory use to the primary daycare use of the site. And just want to go over, how we arrived, the reasoning behind arriving at that position. I started looking at the issue by attempting to figure out what use group the school-age children program would fit into, looking at the various use groups in use group 3, use group 4, and then the commercial use groups 6, I believe 7 or 9, I think were the only ones that seem to be to work for this type of use.
Use group 7 or 9 as what?
I just, I wanted to be comprehensive, so I looked at those different use groups to try and find where, essentially an aftercare program would fit. Not finding an expressly listed use group categorization, I was really trying to figure out, how to categorize this use. So what I did was look at the New York State database, which contains all the facilities that have the school-age children permit, to see how those programs were classified by zoning. And essentially, most were not. So in finding facilities that had the school-age permit, many were associated with public schools, and some were associated with private daycares. So the thinking was that I would continue looking at those school-age programs in different facilities and see if I could cross-reference with the New York City permit database for programs that have the city's permits under Article 47. Those programs obviously meeting the definition of school under 1210. So in cross-referencing the state database with the city database, I was able to find several examples of facilities that had permits for both types of uses. I included 5. That was an arbitrary number. I just stopped there because I had made it through A, and then also included the other Children of America site that not only has New York City permits, but also has a New York State permit. And I included the certificate of occupancy because in some instances, potentially, a daycare use could possibly be classified as use group 6, possibly as use group 4 if they're a nonprofit. So it was really just trying to show examples of other facilities that had the same range of uses, including the New York City permit, the New York State permit, and were also classified as a use group 3 school and had the CO to show that.
What's the New York City permit that they're getting?
So the New York City permit is the Article 47 health code permit. That's basically, the New York City permit is what is referred to in the 1210 definition of school. Mm-hmm. That definition hasn't changed since 1961. Mm-hmm. It's always referred to Article 47 of the New York City health code for daycare use.
Who issues this? Is the health department or child services?
It's Department of Health and Mental Hygiene.
Okay, so Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is issuing this permit to both the little kids and the older kids?
No. So it's basically infants and toddlers,
Right.
0 to 5, are subject to the Article 47 of the New York City Health Code permit.
Okay.
So there's 2 separate permits. There's one for infants and there's one for slightly older children. So infants and say.
And who's issuing the slightly older children?
So the 0 to 5, 2 different permits issued by the city, the city's New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. The school-age children, that's issued by the state, and that's pursuant to social services law and it's the Office of Children and the New York State Office of Children and Family Services regulates and issues the school-age permit. So it's city for ages 0 through 5 and state for ages 6 and above, 6 through 12. Yep.
Yeah,
So I can send you.
yeah, yeah. No, it's okay, I just, yeah.
John Daly, Fire Department.
Mhm.
Regarding the permits that's issued by the city and the state, by the health department, after inspections by the building department and the fire department,
Right,
then the DOH issues their permits.
okay.
Right, so as you can imagine, it's a pretty rigorous process to get these permits. I think we discussed some of that in our materials, both the Article 47 city permit as well as the state permit require extensive, not only looking at the facility itself and whether it meets the relevant regulations, but whether or not the staff is meets the requirements to.
But so, I'm just trying to understand, because this
Sure.
is really a DOB call, I have to say. But if you were to find, is there such a thing as a exclusively school-age daycare program that gets this state permit?
So I think that's a great question, and that's exactly what I was trying to find is there a standalone aftercare facility, which would seemingly necessitate a defined use group to operate under. I wasn't able to find that, and I think speaking from my own experience, my daughter's in public school. There's about 5 different aftercare programs that operate at her public school, and that's why I went to these different databases to try and find examples of where this use exists, and I wasn't able to. I'm not saying that it isn't out there, but at least I wasn't able to find a standalone aftercare resource. I think there's places like, tutoring centers, places that offer a different type of service that's more
Those are businesses.
exactly, that could be in a use group 6 retail space. That would, I guess here would be as of right, but that's not what's being offered here. This is essentially aftercare akin to the daycare that's being offered to the younger children, but after children are released from school. And I'll just mention a couple.
Wait, but you said
Section
something
is
very important.
interesting, yeah.
Wait a second.
I think
We're all in the wrong place over here. You don't need anything for the daycare if that part is a commercial thing, right? If there was a way to configure it, this is your client's business, right? If there was a way to configure it to say the after-school program is use group 6, you don't need it to be accessory to the use group 3, sorry. You don't need it to be accessory. Let it be a standalone use group 6. It's children, so it's not like we're afraid about the adult outsiders mixing with the children. We know we have, right? We see this all the time. I just want to put this in perspective.
Sure.
We see all the time on these 7319s where there's an office building and a school with a school inside, and then we're all worried about how do we separate the office use from the school because we're concerned those are adults. But if it was a school next to a school, even within, and they're even sharing facilities, if this package, this pod over here is a use group 6, and this pod is a use group 3, do we really need to be giving a 7319 special permit to the use group 6?
So I think that's a great point,
Right?
and our hesitation in articulating that specific point was that the younger children here, the concern is that this daycare is in a manufacturing district, and it just seemed difficult to make, at least for our office, to make the connection between needing to come in to the BSA to authorize daycare use, school use in a manufacturing district, but then having this as of right use for older children. It certainly solves our problem, and we'll be happy to run that down. But that was the hesitation that I had in articulating that argument. And again, this is a daycare facility, the school age program would operate within the same building, same staff. I'm sure it can be done. I just haven't figured out how to separate that use as use group 6.
So
from
let's,
use group 3.
little thinking cap stuff. Do the parents pay for the children to come to this school, to this daycare facility?
They do in the same way that the daycare parents are paying. I mean, it's
No, that's what I mean. So
Sure.
do the 4-year-olds have to pay, the 4-year-old parent, the parents of the 4-year-old have to pay for the services that are received?
yes, everyone has to pay.
So it's one of those strange things in the zoning resolution where sometimes a medical office is a community facility and sometimes it's a use group 6 office, and it's your choice to pick which one, because the zoning resolution recognizes that sometimes you want medical offices in residential neighborhoods, right? You could do the same exact thing here. You can say that the older kids where this is not a not-for-profit, this is charging, right? So you don't have to call it a not-for-profit without sleeping accommodations or something like that for those kids, right? So this would be one of those things that where we wouldn't be even investigating what happens, how those older kids are handled, right? We're only concerned about how the little kids are handled with respect to the older kids if that were an issue, but we're actually talking about not very many older kids, right?
So
My only question is, will there be any change in the total number of units, classroom layouts or anything with regards to accessory overtime? Will there be, for that you want the flexibility?
Well, I mean, right now, and I'll have to look at it a little bit more closely. Right now, it's the space is designed with those school-age children in mind. I'll talk to the operator. I think ultimately this presents a cleaner solution, though, and would remove, a certain number of students from the entire analysis. So, if
It's
the
like
school age
15
program
kids.
is not subject to the 7319 special permit, because it's an as-of-right use here, we can make that argument.
DOB also has a code notes about this that says that daycares can be use group 3, use group 6, or use group 4.
Right. So that's interesting
So
too.
it says
interesting.
daycare.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Wait,
That's
this actually
even more
throws
interesting.
this throws the whole thing away. Then why are we even looking at
Yes.
this in an M1 zone?
Yes.
Um,
Why does this have to be a school? Go install this thing, right? If a daycare
yeah.
is use group 6,
So
I really recommend you do
Perhaps
this. They
the
don't
other
want to
way-
be married to the BSA, right?
maybe a possible plan of action is at 81 as to what this use would be and whether it's as a
Yeah.
right in the district.
Yeah.
Yes, you should do that. Take that, is that a technical policy notice?
code notes.
Code notes.
And use group 3, 6, and which one?
How would one find that on DOB's
3,
website?
4, and 6, I think.
3, 4, and 6. Or 6.
How do you find code notes?
I just emailed it to you, but if you just did a site-specific
Sure.
search for code notes on Google, site :nyc.gov, code notes, daycare, zoning, buildings.
So I'll have a look at that. I'm comfortable removing the school-age children program if we can find a way to entirely remove this application from the purview of the board and the special permit. We'll happily do that. We'll look into that.
Yeah, don't be concerned if DOB
Yeah.
says it can be use group 6, which by the way, I have often seen DOB say, wait a minute, this daycare is not a school. It's not in this situation, but I've worked with daycare operators. In fact, we had something like this. There was like, what's it called? Not Jungle Hub, it has another name like that. It's one of those playground things.
Like Gymboree?
Gymboree, where we had a Gymboree situation, which is effectively the same thing, right? Parents bringing their kids to a place to play, and that means being taken care of for a lot of hours. It's effectively daycare, right? And the DOB saying, oh no, that's commercial use, that's use group 6, and you can't have that in a residential district, right? So that was a clear example of DOB determining that effectively a place where kids come to play is a commercial use, right? So don't fight the stream that's flowing in your direction.
Of course. And so I'll just wrap up. The other questions and that were raised at the review session were largely around traffic, circulation, and parking.
I think it would be moved up after.
Of course. I just want to note for the record that we're working with DOT. We received their comments last week. The project team is putting together a response there, which I think would ultimately, if necessary, address most of the board's concerns. And I'll leave everything else.
Okay, so I do, seeing the look of consternation on Madam Tony Matias's face. She's concerned because here we had the DOT look at the safety situation, right? And by giving up sort of BSA purview, we're giving up a safety situation. But what I would say is, don't give up the recommendations that are being given by DOT to protect the safety of the children. If it turns out that you could do this as of right, you have very important direction from DOT on a location that's a crash site, a crash intersection, right? So, for your client to ignore the recommendations of DOT because it's a danger zone would be just, frankly, a mistake, right?
And I'll note that even prior to, so the project engineer has been working with DOT all along, and we're actually speaking directly with the traffic engineering and planning divisions. We're outside of school safety, so I think DOT's jurisdiction it sticks with us regardless of whether or not the special permit is ultimately issued by the board.
Yeah, those maps.
So we'll continue that discussion with DOT. Could we put this on for a relatively short return date so we can look into the sort of now
I'm sorry.
bigger threshold question?
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
will you be seeking a ZD1?
Will you be seeking a what?
ZRD1.
ZRD1.
That's
Sorry.
the only way we would feel comfortable,
Yes.
having that interpretation from DOB, because obviously there's precedent at BSA for similar daycare facility, for-profit daycare facilities within manufacturing districts. So we don't want to ask DOB for this determination and find that they came to the same conclusion that we did.
I mean, some of them are UPKs, right? So a UPK is a whole other subject because they must qualify as a school to qualify for UPK funding, right? But if this is not a UPK or part, right, then it's a different subject. So all this has to do with what your client is intending to do.
And I think that the zoning resolution is obviously subject to interpretation, but there is a prohibition on schools in manufacturing districts. A daycare facility operating pursuant to an Article 47 permit is a school as defined by zoning. So while there might be a potential for different use group assignments, I think ultimately we might be facing a determination that we are a
that's fair.
school and we need the 7319
That's
special
fair,
permit.
and a Gymboree is arguably not an Article 47, though I have no idea.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
But otherwise, I think.
But then we're talking about the older kids, and maybe that could be isolated, so we don't, but your ZRD1 could address that. So you could ask them, DOB, do you consider these older kids to be an accessory use, or can I just treat that as a use group 6?
Right,
all
and I
by
think
itself?
that discrete issue, if
Okay.
that would really solve that
Yeah.
issue that was raised by the board.
Okay.
And I think we can put together that CD1 relatively quickly and have that out there as we continue to resolve and work with DOT to resolve the other issues related to parking demand, circulation. Our engineers have already started to run through the new trip generation as requested by DOT, which is essentially an entirely new analysis that's taking into account the actual proposed use rather than sort of a seeker a community daycare use that's looking at an increment rather, or we're no longer looking at an increment, we're looking at the actual proposed use.
Okay. Are there any speakers on this?
Just give me one
Go
second.
ahead. You're welcome to speak. Okay.
Okay, yeah, if it would be possible to submit and come back in the summer, like late July.
Is that enough
August.
time for you to file and get a response on a ZRD1?
We've been getting them back pretty quickly lately, which is, I know, is a
What?
surprise.
How quickly is pretty quickly?
But 3 weeks.
Wow,
No kidding. What?
that's great.
But
But
August.
I mean, 4
August.
weeks from now, if you submitted 4 weeks from now, you still wouldn't be in hearing until August 13th.
That would work for us if that works for you.
That work for you?
Yeah,
There are
yeah,
21
that's fine.
cases. That's fine. So let's do submission July 24th for hearing on August 13th.
So does that mean the CRD one also has to be received by 24th?
He says that they can
do it.
They can do it really quickly.
I mean,
Maybe they'll have an answer
it's,
by then.
yeah, so,
'Cause August
yeah.
15th is 7 weeks from today.
yeah, so arguably we'll get it. I mean, it's a pretty critical question. It's the threshold, right? So, but at the same time, there were other questions about traffic and safety of children that needs to be addressed. There's
Right.
plenty of other stuff to work on. Okay. Back and forth with DOT as well. Right. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. This concludes the public hearing
Thank you.
for June
Thank you.
25th, 2019.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
You can send your child to office for an approval.